I admit I didn't know that a bookkeeper would do that, but she revealed her value to me in that action, and I didn't ask her to do it. The best assistants are proactive, and they see around corners, and they anticipate, and they understand the context. My bookkeeper understands the context of my work.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fun one. Our guest is a workplace expert, speaker, and author who has over 25 years' experience as a personal assistant for the now late Academy Award-winning actress Olympia Dukakis. Bonnie Low-Kramen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. And I mean, we're going to be talking about the workplace, employees, and a lot of that. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Before we get into all of that, please tell us a little bit about you and your career journey leading up to this point.
Right. Well, nothing about my career was planned. That is what I've come to conclude after all of these years. I was a theater major in college, and I've had dreams of being an actress, and ended up working in a theater box office in Chicago. And that led me to doing PR and marketing for Olympia Dukakis' whole theater in Montclair, New Jersey, which is very close to where I'm from. I'm a Jersey girl. And within less than a year, Olympia got cast in the film Moonstruck, which is the movie that she won the Academy Award for. And so a job that began in relative anonymity it would be like you and I working together to figure out how do we get bodies in these seats for the theater, turned into this very high profile job that changed my entire life because the Academy Award led to working with Olympia as her personal assistant, someone who wrangled all of the details of her life. And neither of us dared to think it would last for 25 years. You know, all I knew is I needed a job, and she needed someone to help her organize her life. And at the time when I began with her, I didn't even know there was a name for what I was doing, which was a personal assistant. And over those years, what I realized is that I learned a great deal about being an assistant, but I did it by winging it, Michael. And I went to the bookstore and looked for books about being a great assistant, and I couldn't find it. I looked for a class to learn how to do it better. You know, I went to college. I believe in education. And I was shocked that there are so many assistants in the world, but so few resources. So that's when I decided, well, I guess I'm going to have to write the book myself. And I guess I'm going to have to create the class myself. And for the last 11 years, I have been traveling the world, teaching and speaking to assistants who are looking to be the ultimate. The book is Be the Ultimate Assistant. And I had no idea that the work would take me to 14 countries and get me on podcasts talking to people like you who want to have an inside look about what's really happening inside this workplace. It's endlessly fascinating to me, and I'm just thrilled it got me to this moment.
It's amazing. And what a journey. And the book is Be the Ultimate Assistant, a celebrity's assistant's secret to working with any high-powered employer. Right. And so, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, when you say personal assistant, I don't know that many people would know what a personal assistant actually does unless they've ever had one.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, that's why I didn't even know there was a name for it. it was this kind of secret niche of a subset of executive assistants. And in fact, the reality is in 2022 that most executive assistants who work in a corporate environment, for CEOs and executives, et cetera, and we have a vision of what that is, those mostly women, the profession is still mostly women, 95 to 98% female. Those women in these days are also doing personal functions. Personal assistant duties include things like personal gift buying, dinner reservations, organizing a personal calendar, doing shopping, anything to help a busy executive manage their time better. The way I used to view it is that my work enabled Olympia Dukakis to do the things that only she could do. Only she could memorize her lines. Only she could go for her costume fitting. I couldn't do any of those things for her, but I could reserve the car. I could deal with hair and makeup. I could go buy the lamp that she had been looking for and was finally in at the store, kind of thing. On some days, I was the highest paid prescription picker-upper in New York City, but I loved the work because my work enabled Olympia to do her work. So personal is just that. It's personal. And sometimes personal assistants work out of people's homes, which I did with Olympia Dukakis in New York City. But sometimes they're out of an office. It's a very interesting animal of a job. And that's why I wrote the book, because there were very few resources out there for the work. But these days, most executive assistants, unless it's specifically named that they're not supposed to do personal work, many executive assistants do personal tasks for their executives, mainly because it boils down to having only 24 hours in a day. And how are we all getting what we need done?
Isn't that true? And, I think there's a real close relationship between our audience of bookkeepers and our listener right now is listening, is they are working on a business owner's finances and understanding those finances, putting those finances together in a way that helps them do their best work and focus on their superpower. And so I'm sure a lot of the concepts are very, very relatable in that when somebody, as a business owner or an executive, when you did the work for Olympia, I mean, going and getting the prescription so she could spend an extra hour doing her lines or makeup or whatever she had to do. I mean, the value of that is incredibly high and valuable. I mean, if she couldn't do that,
absolutely,
big problem.
Absolutely. So here's the thing: we had tremendous mutual respect. I started out as an actress, so I had great empathy for what she did, but I did not want to do what she did. And conversely, she looked at what I was doing as her assistant, and her attitude was like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to touch a computer. I don't even want to do anything that you're doing, but I understand your value, that you do what I need you to do. Now, I am a person who has employed a bookkeeper for the last 8 years. And while the best assistants go above and beyond every single day, well, my bookkeeper in the early days of the pandemic, she went above and beyond for me. I had speaking engagements canceling left and right. I was just trying to pivot and figure out, oh my gosh, how quickly could I get an on-demand class created? And she was the one who came forward and said to me, Bonnie, the government is offering PPP money, money to help bridge the financial gap with the pandemic. And while I had some idea about PPP money, I really didn't know the nuts and bolts of it. And it really wasn't on my front burner. But I was so grateful that she brought it to my attention. And not only that, she helped me through the whole application process. And I admit I didn't know that a bookkeeper would do that, but she revealed her value to me in that action. And I didn't ask her to do it. the best assistants are proactive, and they see around corners, and they anticipate, and they understand the context. My bookkeeper understands the context of my work, that she knows that it's up and down and variable, and no quarter is ever going to look like the next quarter. There's just very little predictability to it. In fact, that's the nature of it. It's not predictable at all. So I don't like my career. So I am loyal to her, and she is loyal to me. We see each other as individual subject matter experts. What I teach at Be the Ultimate Assistant in my workshops is that every single one of us are subject matter experts in at least one thing, but probably many, many things. And I'm not great at bookkeeping and finance. And when I left Olympia to teach and speak, that's what I wanted to do, Michael. I didn't set out saying, I want to be a business owner, but I didn't know that in 12 seconds after I made the decision to resign, that's what I was turning into, was a business owner. And so what I learned and what I teach is that we as small business owners need to job out the things that we're not good at, the things that we don't like to do, and that the ROI, the return on investment, is going to come from that by saving us time and energy and angst, which is exactly what I did for Olympia Dukakis.
Amazing. And it brings up the question of the character of an assistant or even a bookkeeper. Is there characteristics that need to be in place? Like there's things people can learn, and there's things that it's just the way they see the world, and
right.
Something like compassion. I mean, if someone's not compassionate person, it would be like, oh, how do you learn to be compassionate? I mean, that might take 20 years. So are there certain characteristics that you have found along the way that if they don't have them, this isn't going to go well?
Yes. And the short answer is absolutely yes, that there are innate skills, but then there are learned skills that go along with the work. Now, clearly a bookkeeper needs to be, learning QuickBooks and all the nuts and bolts of that. But the personality traits that work best are when a person is very curious, naturally curious to know about another person's life, and something about their personality and to learn from how they respond best to information. What's the best time of day to deliver that kind of information? How do they want to receive it? Are they email people, text people? Now, there are certain people on the planet who couldn't give a darn about those nuances about how to work together. But the best assistants, and I think the best bookkeepers, are ones who are innately curious to know the backstory so that context can inform their work, which is what my bookkeeper did for me. In understanding the context of my business, she brought forth, really valuable information. The other personality trait is there's a phrase called the service heart. If most great assistants have a service heart, that there is something deep inside them that drive them to want to serve others. And that's not to say they're slaves, but that they are interested in they're not terribly interested in having the limelight and being in front of the camera, say, which is what was the case with Olympia and me. But they really are comfortable being behind the scenes, making things happen. And so when Olympia raised her arm with that Oscar in her hand, and she thanked all of her colleagues at the whole theater, I knew that I was one of the people she was talking about. And that over the years, in 25 years, over and over again, there were different ways that she showed me appreciation. And so we had what I would term a partnership. And so an innate personality trait would be one that yearns for partnership, one that benefits each of you. And that's those are the qualities of the best partnerships in business. It's no longer a strict hierarchy and where managers are way up on this pedestal and lowly staffers are way below them. It's much more of a peer-like framework now, in large part because of the demands of this complicated workplace and the universal given of only 24 hours in a day. The question becomes, how are we best using that time? And the best assistants, the best bookkeepers are putting their minds on how can they support their employers, whoever they are, to do their work in the best possible way. And so they're always looking for that. These are more than just jobs. These are careers. These are impacting people's lives. And the best of us take it very seriously.
Mm. It really relates, and I think it's important for people to understand the characteristics that you spoke about. I would imagine that anyone's listening to this podcast right now, they have some of those traits, but I think the important thing is to value them in oneself, because if you don't, then you won't know how to bring that value to the world. And so it's really refreshing to hear. And, when you speak of that, and the bookkeepers that I know are great bookkeepers, every single one of those traits exists. And so really embracing that value, that's not everyone has the service heart. And without the service heart, there's going to be a big missing. Valuable. Now, you talked about just a little bit there, this work environment that we have today. Right. And obviously we want to have a harmonious work environment. What is it that our listener needs to do in order for their business to have a harmonious work environment? And even in the world of being this is a virtual environment now, so much.
Right. The biggest piece of advice I have for leaders and small business owners is to take a fresh look at the people who are on your team, and they are to be viewed as individual contributors, as unique subject matter experts. Everyone on a person's team has been brought on for a reason. At some point in the past, you looked at their resume and said, I want to hire them, So you've got a team of people who are on the payroll getting paid. But the situation is different now. We're 2 years after this pandemic, and what we knew about people prior to the pandemic could be very different now. There could be different situations in their lives that are impacting their work, and the best business owners I know make it their business to find out what those things are. For me, my bookkeeper decided to relocate to a different city in the country, and of course the work can be remote. But I cared about that. I made it my business as to care about the living situation. I know what it is to move. I know what it is to relocate. And it's as exciting as it is. It can be stressful and tense and anxiety producing. And so I made sure to talk about that with them. It is crucial that the people of your work environment are seen as human beings. During the pandemic, an assistant I know, her dad passed away, and her employer showed up at that funeral and came to the repast. And we need to really take in the people who are working closest to us. I have an assistant for 9 years, and we do the same thing. To do one-on-ones, to care about people as people and what's going on in their lives right now, right here, right now, what would make the difference for them? Because what would make the difference for employee A could be very different than for employee B. And the only way a small business owner is going to find that out is if they ask them one-on-one and pick up that, there's a CEO in New York City, really big company. And what she did during the pandemic, she made it her business that every single day she literally picked up the phone and called 10 staffers randomly, and just to say, tell me how you are. At the beginning of the pandemic, that same CEO gave every staffer a $500 gift card to outfit their home office however they saw fit. And then just recently, now in 2022, gave the staff another $500 to make it even better, their home office. It's that. That is the number one piece of advice. And essentially that means respecting your people as people. But there are a couple of other tips that you're saying, how do you build a harmonious work environment? Acknowledge that things have changed and that systems will be different, whatever they are. I don't profess to know the bookkeeping business backwards and forwards, but the missing link often, Michael, is that leaders don't ask their employees their opinions on the actual running of the company. And right now in 2022, the big we have an amazing opportunity right now because there's been so much volatility, so much change that our staffs of the world, they have opinions about the way offices are being reconfigured and hybrid work schedules and what would work best. They have opinions, and the best business owners ask their people. I'm writing a new book, and one of the chapters is literally called Ask. Ask first. It makes staff crazy when all these big decisions are being made around them about them and their work and their benefits, their monies, etc. And no one asks them. It is the height of disrespect. And then it's just super important to be honest about what's going on. The most harmonious work environments, the ones with the most stable staffs, are the ones whose leaders have gone consistently in front of them to say, well, here's the situation this week. We don't have all the answers. Here's the issue. There's the famous story from during the pandemic that Dan Price of Gravity Payments went in front of his team and said, I don't have enough money to pay everybody. I want your opinion. What should we do? And the staff voluntarily took 20% pay cuts across the board so no one would have to be laid off. But he went to his people and he revealed the problem and they presented the solution to him. So I think those are some key elements about harmonious work environments. Perhaps if there's one thing to add, it would be fair rules. Be sure to have rules that apply to everybody and that are fair, because trust me, staff knows when things are not fair.
It's amazing, from what I'm hearing in that is just a reminder of the most important one is the being human, treating people with respect, and that is near free. You have the budget to give everyone $1,000 to work on their home office, but just having a conversation and being empathetic with them is worth $10,000.
Exactly. Can you imagine how those staffers felt when the CEO called them on the phone?
Amazing.
Right?
Yes.
They'll never forget that. They'll never forget. We're never going to forget how people behaved during this pandemic. Do you think that's true, Michael? That we will remember when people were kind and we will remember when people were not kind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is the same too. That translates back to the industry in that one works. I mean, bookkeepers calling their clients just to see how they are, not calling them to talk about work, but just to check in with them. I mean, in this industry, that's not uncommon to hear that because of the service heart, right? It's like they're more worried about their clients than they are about their own self many times, which can be a slippery slope as well. You've got to take care of yourself. But I think that's a strong point of our industry and the people that work in it. So some really great thoughts there. I think our listener can bring that to their world right away after listening to this. You mentioned something before we actually started our conversation, in the pre-conversation, if you will, of this interview is the TED Talk that you had done about women and how women, now many of our listeners are women, and in this industry it's dominated by women. I'd really like to talk a little bit about that and how women often don't negotiate well for themselves.
Right. In general, and I have studied this, trust me, oh my gosh, because I was so curious to understand what was going on. In general, women are not trained how to negotiate. When we are younger, we are socialized in certain ways. And in general, women are socialized to be grateful for the money that we receive and to not question it so much, because we are socialized to take as authority whoever is in charge, and in general in the workplace that is usually meaning men, and we're not taught how to question it. Now it has gotten better in the last decade, but the reality is that there's a serious wage gap in the world, that women are making Caucasian women are making 79 cents for every dollar that a man makes. And so there is a serious wage gap to be bridged. The data shows that only 7% of women will negotiate a salary proposal versus, in contrast, 57% of men will negotiate it. That the data shows that men in general view negotiations as a game, that it's fun, that it's not caught up with their self-image and their self-worth so much. Now, I know I'm generalizing in a big way, but most women will be nodding their heads to this, that it is excruciating for most women to negotiate a salary. And yet, in this workplace, we've seen, the pandemic chased away 5 million women in the United States from the workplace because of they're still the main caregivers for child care, et cetera. Women have a mountain to climb, but part of the mountain can be climbed through education. And much of the work I do, many of the workshops I give, absolutely deal with money, because money can be the game changer. Does it mean everything? Absolutely not. And in fact, in the TEDx talk that I gave called The Real Reasons People Quit, salary is the third thing. It's not the most important thing. To be respected and appreciated are the top two things that staffers want in the workplace. And to be paid fairly is third. And fourth is to be offered the ability to keep learning, offered professional development and training. The money piece is one of those subjects in the workplace that has traditionally been secret and forbidden and taboo. And because of this great resignation that started in 2021 and the pandemic causing this YOLO economy, YOLO, YOLO, you only live once, with people, saying, you know what? I don't want to take this toxic environment anymore. I'm going to jump on this job market and get a new, better job and move across the country near my family, et cetera. So the environment, the sands are shifting, but still we have serious work to do with women and educating on the successful ways to negotiate. The data is now showing that women are getting much better at negotiating starting salaries, but we still have a long way to go when it comes to renegotiating, the annual review 2 years later, 5 years later. And usually it ends up that they leave jobs as opposed to negotiating a better salary. And I'm of a mind that I want it to be the decision of women to decide if you leave or go. And I think too many women are leaving potentially good jobs because they simply do not have the tools they need to negotiate better terms at the job they are currently in. And I want to see more of that happening.
It's rampant in this industry. I hear all the time, I haven't raised my prices in so many years. The fear of getting the pricing wrong because they would have to go and renegotiate from scope creep. Many talk about scope creep, and it's like literally, it's one of these things where it's like they're afraid to even bid the work, because if the scope creeps, that means they have to negotiate something new. And recently, I was just on with one of our listeners, talking to them about their business, and there was a woman who had quit and just quit her business, a bookkeeping business, and she took over all the clients. I mean, that's the care heart, right? The
service heart.
Service heart, sorry. I was going to say Care Bear or something. It's like the service heart there. I'm thinking of the Care Bear heart one. Yeah. Sorry. But that was, she's taking care of her clients. She's like, I'm going to quit. I can't do this anymore. I can't. Business isn't working. I'm going to quit. But yet she's still out there looking to take care of her clients in the transition. Well, all of the clients that were paying, it was rock bottom prices. No wonder her life was miserable, because she was making no money and working so hard. And the interesting thing is that when this new business owner renegotiated, they were happy to pay 5 times more.
Let me guess. No one balked. No one balked. The clients, employers, they want to see the value. And if I may comment on what you just said, the big word, the operative word here is fear, that the fear is paralyzing us. The fear is stopping us dead in our tracks to do what we want to do, what would feed our soul. And so I see part of my goal is to show women and men the way out of that. And that is to conquer that fear. Some of the fears are well-founded, but some are irrational. And what I have seen in the work I do is the solution is rooted in putting the facts in writing for the clients, for the employers. Part of it has to do with women have difficulty finding the words to say, the actual words to say out loud to a client that says, well, I need to raise my prices, and, I haven't done it in 3 years, and I deserve it, and I'm working so hard, blah, 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 blah. And it feels really awkward and excruciatingly painful. So the solution to that is to put it in writing, is to create a document that is clearly fact-based, clearly laying out the responsibilities that you have, the tasks that you do, the number of hours it's taking to do them, that clients and executives respond to data, to the metrics. I say to my students, dazzle them with data. Give them the facts that they can look at ahead of time, so that you're essentially making the case in writing. And then you get to decide based on black and white facts and figures. And my goodness, bookkeeping is a facts and figures business. So on one hand, it seems like it shouldn't be this hard, but on the other hand, it is very hard, because while any of your listeners right now may be fantastic bookkeepers, that does not equate with being a great business owner, which takes practice and skill and experience and mentorship. It was the same with me. I was a great assistant, did not translate into being a great business owner. I had to learn by burn, as they say.
It's interesting you say that, because the example that I gave you of this bookkeeper, and I'm sure she's listening. I'm not going to name her because of the sensitive information, but she was just 3 years ago the exact same as the one that she took over for. But she was charging rock bottom prices. The business was failing. She was and that was. She did the work. She faced her fear. She hired people. She joined one of our communities and worked with people that were growing and striving to be better. And she did the work, and it took her several years, but now here she is. She's charging 5 and 10 times more.
Yeah.
in the industry and her business is thriving,
Right.
because she faced all of those things that you talked about. She faced those. She did the work. She, what was it you said, the burn, the
I
learning through the
learned
burn?
by burn. I learned by burn.
Yeah.
Hey, we all have to make a living. We all need to pay our bills, but we women in general have been socialized that we should be grateful for the work. And so therefore the fear, and I imagine with a bookkeeper, is like, oh my gosh, my fear is that they're going to, leave me and go to somebody else. The attitude needs to be, you're solving a problem. You're solving a problem for them, as opposed to, of course, we're grateful for work, but I see that my bookkeeper solves a problem for me. And so I happily pay her bill each quarter, and I do it on the day it arrives also. So for any small business owner listening, because anyone who receives payments, we know who pays on time. I want to be known as a business owner who pays quickly, because you know what? When I need something quickly, I know I'm going to get it because I do that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I absolutely. It's one of those things that it just goes a long way to it kind of comes back to respect. I mean,
Sure.
It was an interesting from really early in my career. I worked for Dun & Bradstreet, which is the company that collects all of that data, how people pay.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting in that the small business owners typically pay very quickly, whereas large organizations, they use that money as financing, essentially. If a big company owes money, they'll pay in 90 days, right? But they expect the money in 2 weeks, right? Because they work the money. But at small business, you're dealing with different currencies, respect, and it's different. So I think the better we treat others how we want to be treated, the better I think it goes for all of us.
Well, and it doesn't have to be big, expensive things, but be sure to acknowledge birthdays and, Christmas/Hanukkah, holiday time. Those things matter. Handwritten cards, just any time of year, just to say, I really appreciated you doing XYZ for me. That's a very human way to behave. And we have these business relationships. They're still humans, and these actions matter. I make sure to remember, how much did I give last Christmas, so that I make sure that this year is either equal or more, because trust me, and you probably know this, people remember, women especially remember. We remember, bonuses and, what was said. We remember exactly what was said to us when it's particularly meaningful, whether it was a kindness or, a show of disrespect. And disrespect, I promise every business owner listening, that is a surefire way of chasing people away.
So true.
Oh boy.
So true. Bonnie, this has been fantastic. I would love for you to talk a little bit about some of the offerings that you have to help people in this area. I think it's very relatable to our listener. You've got a book, you've got various, you've spoken in TED. You've got programs. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. My workshop is called Be the Ultimate Assistant, and it's a 3-day class. I have worked hard to create a website that lays it all out for anyone who would like to go to it. So it's bonnielowkramen.com is my website, and you will see different offerings. So besides the 3-day workshop, I'm beginning a monthly community called Staff Matters. The Staff Matters community. And it's inviting into the community for these monthly 90-minute meetings, not only assistants, but human resources professionals, recruiters. I welcome bookkeepers, anyone in this workplace who cares about making it better, because I think now's the time. We have a golden opportunity right now. So the resources that I'm offering have everything to do with making it better for our kids and our grandkids who are coming up behind us. So I do speak and teach all over. I have 17 cities to do between now and the end of the year. So I'm on my website, I have my tour calendar. I'm going all over, including 3 international cities. But my sweet spot is to train staff either alone, to train them to be the CEO of You Incorporated, that every staffer needs to take charge of their own careers and their own lives. And I also love doing training not only with the staff, but with their leaders right there in the room with them.
Amazing.
And that's considered such a radical idea, but yet it's so effective to bring the people together who are actually working together on a day in, day out basis to talk about how they're doing the work and how to do it better together. Because there's a lot at stake in this workplace. It's a whole different ballgame right now. And we'd better be ready for the volatility that's coming next, Michael. I think, we're not done with the chaos that was started. And I think the smartest staffers and executives out there are the ones thinking ahead and running the what ifs, like what if it happens again? And you know what those what ifs are. And the big question becomes, are we ready? And that's what I train assistants to think about so that they can bring those solutions to their leaders. And in so doing, create a much better workplace.
Fantastic. And so true. And so true. Well, we'll have several links for our listener in the show notes. And again, Bonnie, I want to thank you for your generosity in coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us.
Well, thanks so much, Michael. I really hope your listeners find 1 or 2 things that they can actually use.
I know they will. I know they will. I did.
Yeah, I'm so happy. Thanks.
You're welcome. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.